There were 9 men who said no, and 1 who almost did. Catherine Holloway was 41 years old, the founder and chief executive of Holloway Capital, a private investment firm managing assets that most Canadians would not believe if the number were spoken aloud. She had a corner office in a glass tower on Bay Street, a townhouse in Rosedale she almost never cooked in, and a calendar so full that her assistant, Preethi, color-coded it by urgency, just so Catherine could see at a glance where she was allowed to breathe. By every visible measure, Catherine had built exactly the life she had intended to build. What the measure could not show was this: she had eaten dinner alone for the past 217 nights. She had counted, not obsessively, she simply remembered numbers the way other people remembered faces. She was not sad about it exactly. She had moved past sad some years ago. What she felt now was more clinical, more diagnostic. A pattern had revealed itself, and the pattern said, the men who wanted to know her net worth first. They found out. Somehow they always found out, and after that everything changed. The attention became a little too bright, the texts a little too quick, the questions a little too specific. What does your firm typically look for in a Series B? My brother-in-law has a startup you'd find interesting. Do you ever think about diversifying into real estate? She had learned to recognize it within 3 dates, sometimes 2. So in January, when her closest friend, Audra Mendes, suggested the dating app, and Catherine laughed at the idea, it was not the app itself she was laughing at. It was the exhaustion underneath the laugh. The familiar weight of having to decide, again, whether the person across the table saw her or saw the firm. You need to go in as someone else, Audra said. She was sitting cross-legged on Catherine's kitchen counter eating crackers from the box, the way she had done since they were 23. Not fake name, fake life, someone else. Just quieter, smaller on paper. You're suggesting I lie. I'm suggesting you experiment. Audra held up a cracker. You're in the business of risk assessment. Assess the risk. The profile Catherine built was not extravagant in its fiction. She kept her first name. She went by Kate. She listed her occupation as administrative coordinator for a mid-size consulting firm, which was plausible and unmemorable. Annual income in the modest bracket, a rented apartment in East York. She used a photo taken 3 years ago at a friend's cottage, before the highlights, before the tailored wardrobe, wearing a flannel shirt and a smile that looked like it had cost her nothing. She was, on paper, a perfectly ordinary woman who had her life roughly together. Over the next 6 weeks, she went on 9 dates. The first was a financial analyst named, she would remember this, Jeffrey, who spent 40 minutes explaining why he felt undervalued at his firm, and then asked what she did again, and seemed to lose interest when she repeated the answer. He did not call after. The second was a recently divorced architect who was pleasant and clearly not over his ex-wife. He cried in the parking lot. She drove home and sat in her car for a while. The third and fourth were fine. Just fine. Nothing happened in every direction. The fifth was a man who seemed genuinely interested until, midway through dinner, he mentioned almost carefully that his investment portfolio had not been performing well lately, and he had always wanted a contact in finance. Catherine finished her soup and said she had an early meeting, 6, 7, 8. She was beginning to think the experiment had failed, which was its own kind of data. The 9th date she almost canceled. It was a Wednesday, she was tired, there had been a difficult board call in the afternoon, and she was sitting in her car in the parking garage beneath the restaurant checking messages when she looked at the profile again. His name was listed as Daniel, 48 years old, carpenter and renovation contractor based in Scarborough. The photo showed a man with gray at his temples, paint on his work jacket, squinting a little into afternoon light as though the photo had been taken by someone standing in the sun behind the camera. He had a plain face, not unhandsome, and the expression of someone who was not trying particularly hard to seem like anything. His bio read, "I'm not good at these. I work with my hands, I read a lot on weekends, and I have a daughter who's 8 and who is very opinionated about pasta shapes. I'm not looking for anything complicated, just honest." Catherine sat with that for a moment. Then she went inside. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at the table near the window with his jacket on the back of the chair, reading something on his phone and not pretending not to be. He stood up when he saw her coming, which was a small thing but registered somewhere. "Kate," he said. "Yes, you must be Daniel Reeve." He said the last name like it was just additional information, not a brand. He pulled out the chair across from him before she could reach it herself, not performatively, just a habit of motion. They ordered. He asked how her day was, and she started to give the abbreviated answer she usually gave. And then something made her stop and give a different answer. The longer one. The one about the board call and the fund manager in Calgary, who kept making the same structural error, and the particular fatigue of explaining the same thing to intelligent people who did not want to hear it. Daniel Reeve listened. He did not pretend to understand the technical parts. He said so. I don't know what a derivative structure is. Honestly, I won't fake it, and then asked what it felt like to be the only one in a room who could see the problem clearly. She looked at him. Lonely, she said, in a specific way. He nodded as if that was an answer he recognized. They talked for 2.5 hours. Somewhere in the middle, the food arrived and she forgot to keep track of the pauses in conversation, which was not something that usually happened to her. He talked about his daughter, Meg, full name Megan, but she preferred Meg and had stated this preference at age 6 in a tone that did not invite debate. He talked about her the way people talk about things they love without reserve, straightforwardly, without decoration, as though the love was just a fact that required no defending. His wife had died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed in March, gone by September. He said it without collapsing, but she could see where the weight of it still lived in his face. He had raised Meg alone since, built the business back up from a gap year of grief. He was behind on very little, he said, except maybe sleep and whatever it was people did socially in their 40s. My friend said I should be on more apps, he said. I told her I was barely surviving the one. Catherine laughed. It came out real, which surprised her. When the check came, they had a brief and entirely sincere argument about it that ended with each of them paying their own half, which Catherine found refreshing. Outside on the sidewalk in the January cold, he said, "This was good. I wasn't expecting it to be this good." "Neither was I," she said, which was the truest thing she had said all evening. He asked, with the kind of carefulness that was not uncertainty but consideration, whether she might want to do it again. She said yes. He said good. He walked to his truck, a battered F-150, navy blue, the kind of truck that is not a statement but a tool, and she walked to her car 3 streets over, and she sat in the heated interior of a vehicle that cost more than some people's houses and thought about the way he had listened. She had not told him. She knew she needed to tell him, but not yet. They saw each other 7 more times over the following month. He took her to a rink in Scarborough, where Meg had skating practice on Saturday mornings, and he stood at the boards with a coffee cup and watched with the whole of himself, not his phone, not one eye somewhere else. When Catherine arrived that morning, he had asked carefully if she wanted to come, and she had said yes without pausing to evaluate it. He introduced her simply. "This is Kate, a friend." And Meg, who was 8 and small and had her father's straightforward eyes, looked at Catherine with measured assessment and said, "Do you like hot chocolate?" And that was apparently the test. Catherine said she did. "The kind from the machine is better than the kind they make at the counter," Meg told her. "Dad doesn't believe me, but I'm right." "I believe you," Catherine said. Meg nodded once, satisfied, and skated away. Daniel looked at Catherine sideways. "She doesn't approve of most people. I got the machine hot chocolate endorsement on day 1. I think I'm doing fine." He smiled at his coffee cup. There was a Thursday evening when they sat in his truck in a parking lot after a hardware store run. She had come to help him pick up materials for a weekend job, which she now realized was an extraordinarily domestic thing to agree to, and could not account for exactly when she had agreed. And they ate takeout from the Vietnamese place across the street and talked until the windows fogged. He told her about the house he was trying to buy, a semi-detached in Birchcliff he had been saving for, just big enough for him and Meg and some sense of permanence. He described it the way people describe a thing they've wanted carefully and for a long time. She thought about the townhouse in Rosedale that she rattled around in alone. She thought, "I have to tell him," she thought. Not yet. The delay was not malicious. She told herself it was not malicious. She was waiting, she reasoned, to be sure that what was happening between them was real before she introduced the complication of what she was. She was protecting the thing while it was still forming. She was conducting the experiment to its proper conclusion. She also knew, somewhere beneath all the reasoning, that she was afraid. Not of him, But of the moment his face changed, because faces always changed. What she did not know was that the city is smaller than it seems. A man named Philip Garrett, senior partner at a law firm, client of Holloway Capitals for 11 years, whose daughter happened to attend the same skating club as Meg Reeve, saw Catherine across the rink on a Saturday in February. He saw her standing beside a man in a work jacket, laughing at something, holding a paper cup of machine hot chocolate. He sent a text to his wife. "I just saw Catherine Holloway at a skating rink in Scarborough." His wife, who knew Audra Mendez from a book club, replied, "With a man?" Philip Garrett wrote back, "I think so. The information did not travel immediately, but it traveled. It was Meg who made it matter." In the third week of February, Meg woke up with a fever that did not break by afternoon. By evening, she was confused about small things, where her water cup was, what day it was. And Daniel called the advice nurse, and then, within an hour, drove her to the emergency department at Sick Kids. Catherine found out at 9:30 that night, when her phone lit up with a text. "Meg is at Sick Kids. Fever spiked. I don't want to alarm you, but I also wanted you to know. Sorry if that's strange." She was in her home office. She had a report open on her screen. She closed the laptop and picked up her coat. She had not been invited. She knew that. She went anyway. The waiting room smelled the way all hospital waiting rooms smell, institutional coffee and something beneath it, the particular quiet of people holding very still. Daniel was in a chair near the window. He had his work jacket on still, and his hands around a paper cup that had probably gone cold, and he looked up when she came in and his face did a complicated thing. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know," she said. She sat down beside him. He told her what he knew. Suspected viral infection, possibly strep. They were running tests. Meg was in a room down the hall and had been asking for her stuffed rabbit, which was catastrophically still at home. "What does the rabbit look like?" He described it. Gray, worn at the ears, one eye replaced with a mismatched button after an incident she had never fully explained. Catherine found a 24-hour pharmacy 2 blocks away on her phone, and there was no gray rabbit, but there was a small gray bear that was, she decided, defensible, and she bought it and brought it back, and Daniel looked at her in a way that was not gratitude exactly. It was something more complicated than gratitude. They waited together. The tests came back. Strep, bacterial, responding to antibiotics. Serious enough to be frightening for a few hours, manageable enough to be deeply relieved. The doctor came out, and Daniel exhaled so slowly it was almost inaudible, the breath of someone who had been holding something for a very long time. He went in to see Meg. After a moment, he came back to the doorway. "She wants to know if you're here," he said. Catherine stood up. Meg was in the bed with a needle in her small arm and the gray bear already in her hand. She looked pale and tired, and still very much herself. She looked at Catherine with the same measured assessment as the rink. "Dad said you came," she said. "I came," Catherine said. "Is the bear a substitute for the rabbit?" "It's a companion, not a replacement." Meg considered this. "Okay," she said. "The button eye is weird, though." "I know." It was all they had. "It's fine," Meg said, and closed her eyes in a way that ended the conversation entirely and also, Catherine thought, forgave it completely. She meant to tell him after. The right moment kept shifting. First, Meg needed to recover. Then they needed to return to a version of normal. Then there was a week when they didn't see each other, and she told herself this was fine, just time. It didn't mean anything was receding. Philip Garrett's wife mentioned Catherine Holloway to Audra Mendez at book club on a Thursday night, not with any agenda, just as news. Apparently she's been seeing someone spotted in Scarborough of all places. Audra's face went briefly readable and then recovered. She said nothing. But Audra texted Catherine on the walk home. "Has your name come up? Around the rink in Scarborough?" Catherine stared at the message. Then she typed back, "Who?" The name came through. Philip Garrett. She set the phone down. She picked it up. She calculated. Garrett had been a client for 11 years. His daughter skated at the same club. His wife talked. The information was already in motion. Whatever she had been waiting for, the waiting was over. She called Daniel before she could talk herself into more delay. He answered on the third ring. She could hear what sounded like Meg in the background asking about something. "Can you meet me tomorrow?" she said. "There's something I need to tell you." He heard something in her voice. "Yeah," he said. Of course. They met at the coffee shop near his shop, the ordinary place they had been twice before. with the small tables and the local roast and the chalkboard of specials. She was there when he arrived. He sat down across from her and looked at her in that direct way he had, no performance, just presence, and waited. She told him, not everything at once, but all of it before she stopped. The firm, the assets under management, the Bay Street office, the Rosedale townhouse, the reason she had built the profile the way she had built it, the 9 men before him, what she had been trying to find out. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, someone walked past with a dog. A bus made its particular sound. The chalkboard special was some kind of mushroom soup. "Kate isn't your name," he said. "Catherine. I go by Catherine." He looked at his coffee. "Why didn't you tell me after it was obvious this was something? Why didn't you just tell me?" "I was afraid," she said, which I know isn't a satisfying answer. Afraid of what? That you'd treat me differently, that you'd start calculating something I couldn't see, that the thing between us would change, and I would always wonder if it had been real before. He was quiet again. "I understand it," he said finally. "As a problem. I can see why you did it. He stopped. He turned the cup in his hands. "Meg asked me last week if you were going to keep coming to skating." She didn't say it as a question. She said it like it was just going to be true. Catherine said nothing. "She doesn't trust people quickly," he said. "It took her 8 months to properly speak to my business partner, and she's known him since she was 4. He looked up. "So when I say that her trusting you matters to me, I mean it in a serious way." "I know. And what I'm trying to figure out," he said slowly, "is whether you being afraid means you lied to her too. Whether she's been trusting someone who wasn't completely real." That landed in a place Catherine had not prepared for. She felt it the way she felt things that were true. "She's been trusting the most real version of me I've been in a long time," she said. "I know that might not be enough, but it's what I have." He looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his coat. He said he needed some time, and his voice was even when he said it, not cold, not cruel, just careful. He left the tip on the table and walked out, and the door closed behind him with the ordinary bell sound. Catherine sat with her coffee for another hour. Then she went back to the office, because it was a Tuesday and she had a 2 o'clock. 3 weeks went by. She heard nothing. She did not reach out because she had said what she needed to say, and she had meant it, and adding more words felt like pressure rather than honesty. She told Audra, who listened without comment and then said, "You knew this was possible." And Catherine said yes, and Audra said, "So you're grieving a risk that didn't pay out," and Catherine said, "I suppose so." She went to the rink on a Saturday morning because Meg's skating program ran through March, and she had told herself when she first started going that she would go until the program ended regardless of anything else. She stood at the boards as she always had, coffee in hand, and watched the children work on their edges. She did not expect him to be there. He was at the far end of the boards. He saw her the same moment she saw him. He walked toward her, unhurried, the way he moved through most things. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. "I didn't know you would either." He stood beside her. They watched Meg practice her crossovers. She was concentrating fiercely, her small jaw set in the way she had when she decided something was worth doing correctly. "I talked to my business partner," Daniel said. "Neil. He's been married 22 years. He said something I didn't want to hear." "What did he say?" "He said she told you the truth every time it mattered. He said the rest is context." He paused. "I argued with him about it. He told me I was making perfect the enemy of real." Catherine looked at the ice. "He's not wrong," she said. "No." Daniel wrapped both hands around his cup. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the most real version of yourself." He was quiet a moment. "I think I believe you. I think I knew you were real when you came to the hospital at 10 o'clock at night because I sent one text that didn't even ask you to come." Something in Catherine's chest tightened and then, slowly, released. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "That's not something I can undo. But I'm telling you now that I won't do it again. Whatever this is, whatever we're doing, I want to do it without the scaffolding." He nodded once. Then, "Meg asked about you. Every week. What did you tell her?" "I told her you'd been very busy." He paused. "She said that was a bad answer." "She's right," Catherine said. "It was a bad answer." He almost smiled. It lived at the corner of his mouth, which was where his smiles tended to live before they committed. "I'm not interested in your money," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm renovating a semi-detached in Birchcliff, and I'm going to keep renovating semi-detached in Birchcliff, And that's the life I'm building, and I don't need anything else in it except what's real." "I know that," Catherine said. "That's the only reason I'm here." The practice session ended with the coach's whistle, and the children came off the ice in their particular way. Unsteady at the boards, suddenly loud. Meg spotted her father first, waved, and then her eyes found Catherine. She looked at Catherine with those direct eyes. "You're back," she said. "I'm back," Catherine said. "Were you busy? Very?" Meg appeared to consider the adequacy of this. Then she looked at her father. "Is she staying for hot chocolate?" Daniel looked at Catherine. "Machine kind," Catherine said. "Obviously." Meg nodded, satisfied. She handed her father her helmet and skated the last few feet to the exit gate, with the confidence of someone who had just resolved a matter she had been waiting a reasonable amount of time to resolve. The months that followed were not simple. Nothing that involved a private investment firm, a blended life, a suspicious 8-year-old, and 2 adults still learning each other was going to be simple. And Catherine had enough respect for complexity to know not to expect otherwise. What she had not expected was how ordinary it could feel, how the particular texture of a life, a real one, built from the actual materials available, not the ones she had imagined having, was less dramatic and more sustaining than anything she had previously arranged for herself. Meg had questions, many of them. She was, as Daniel had warned, opinionated about most things and inclined to interrogate the rest. She wanted to know exactly what Catherine did at work. "I manage money for companies and people who have a lot of it. Why do they need you for that? Because it's complicated. Is it actually complicated, or do people just say that?" She wanted to know if Catherine had ever eaten from a food truck. She wanted to know if the downtown office building had a good elevator or a regular elevator. And when Catherine described it, she said, "That's a good elevator," with the tone of someone filing information for later. She did not call Catherine anything in particular for a long time. Not her name, not a title, not a role. Just you, which was its own kind of designation. On a Sunday in November, they were making pasta together. Meg had opinions, as previously noted, and the opinion today was rigatoni. And Catherine was measuring flour, and Meg was standing on the step stool she still needed for the counter, and she said, without looking up from the dough, "My friend Sophie's mom picks her up from school." "That's nice," Catherine said. "She usually brings a snack." "What kind of snack?" "Depends." Meg pressed the dough with her knuckles. "Could you pick me up sometime?" Catherine looked at her. "From school, yes." "With a snack?" Meg considered. "Probably. You could check what I like. I know what you like." Meg looked up at her then, with those 8, now 9-year-old eyes that had always been older than the age attached to them. "So," she said, "could you?" Daniel was in the other room. Catherine could hear him moving around, the familiar sound of him in a space. She thought about the Bay Street office, and the 217 dinners and the long experiment that had felt like protection, and turned out to be, in the end, a door she had finally stopped building walls in front of. "Yes," she said, "I can pick you up." Meg nodded once, returned to the dough. The step stool creaked slightly. "The school's called Birchcliff Heights," Meg said, as though this were merely useful information and not, in the particular grammar of a 9-year-old, an invitation to belong. Catherine wrote it down anyway. On the back of a receipt from her coat pocket, in her ordinary handwriting, the name of the school. A small piece of paper for a small piece of a real life she had not known how to find, until she stopped pretending to be someone who needed less of it.